Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim Defede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim Defede. This week, the Florida legislature passed a new congressional map that was drawn in secret by Governor Ron DeSantis and announced exclusively on Fox News. This was the map the governor's office sent to Fox. He gave it to them before he even gave it to legislators. As you can see, it was color-coded in red and blue to reveal that the new congressional districts could send 4 additional Republicans to Congress from Florida. Before this map was created, there were 20 districts that favored Republicans and 8 that favored Democrats. This new map creates 24 districts that favor Republicans. Here is how State Senator Jason Pizzo described what was happening.
So roughly 41% of the registered voters in the state of Florida, I'm just going by Secretary of State's data, are Republican. But proposing 24 out of 28 congressional maps would mean 86% of all congressional districts are actually Republican districts. Let me pose the question this way. Why is 59% of registered voters in Florida no longer represented?
As we all know by now, this national redistricting battle started last year after President Trump, afraid that Democrats could take over the House, demanded that Texas redraw their map to pick up 5 new Republican seats.
On Texas, how many more seats do you want the Republicans to draw? 5. And then what if California, North Carolina, the blue?
Yeah, well, that's okay too, but 5. I think we get 5. And there could be some other states. We're going to get another 3 or 4 or 5 in addition.
And if there was any doubt about what he meant by other states, a month later on Truth Social, he called on Florida to follow Texas's lead. In response, Democrats in California and Virginia redrew their maps to create more Democratic seats. And following this week's U.S. Supreme Court decision invalidating parts of the Voting Rights Act, other states are likely to enter the fray. And look, I get it. Republicans complain when Democrats do this, and Democrats complain when Republicans do it. There is hypocrisy on all sides. Nevertheless, it is important to remember a few things about Florida that are different than other states. In California and Virginia, their partisan gerrymandered maps were at least given to the voters to approve in advance. DeSantis could have done that. He had plenty of time, but he chose not to, deciding instead to follow Texas's lead of just ramming through a map that favors Republicans. But Florida is not Texas. Florida's constitution specifically prohibits partisan gerrymandering. Voters in 2010 overwhelmingly passed a constitutional amendment known as the Fair Districts Amendment that says congressional maps cannot be drawn to favor or disfavor a political party or an incumbent. And yet the governor now argues he is not bound by the Florida Constitution. During a Senate committee hearing on Tuesday, the governor's legal counsel, Mo Jazil, told senators the governor doesn't believe he has to follow the Fair Districts provision of the state constitution because the governor has decided it's unconstitutional. Think about that for a moment. The governor is now deciding which parts of Florida's constitution he wants to follow. That notion was reinforced when Senator Rosalynn Osgood questioned Jason Poreda, the man who drew the new congressional map.
The question is, how does this map comply with the Florida Fair District Amendment?
Well, as Mr. Jazil just testified, it does not have to.
So since the governor believes he doesn't have to follow the Constitution prohibiting the use of partisan information when drawing congressional maps, that's exactly what Poreda said he did.
Not using race and not having to comply with the Fair Districts Amendments, the entire suite of redistricting criteria that are available to other states I used here, including partisan data, yes.
As you would expect, when it came time to vote, Democrats opposed the new maps and Republicans voted for it. There were a couple of exceptions. In the House, 1 Republican, Hillary Cassell, defied the governor. And in the Senate, 4 Republican senators voted against the map, including 2 from Miami-Dade County, Senator Ileana Garcia and Senator Alexis Calatayud. Neither wanted to speak after the vote, but this is how Republican Senator Jen Bradley, an attorney from North Florida, explained why she voted no.
Being a senator and being in an elected office carries a tremendous responsibility. And I don't have the pleasure, I don't sit here as a senator looking at a map saying, boy, that map looks great for the R's. I don't sit here with the luxury of saying, boy, that map looks good or that map looks bad, picking the map that I like, that I think would be helpful. I have a duty to uphold the Constitution that I swore to defend. I can't do it. It's just unconstitutional, and it's a tough one, but I'm a no.
After the vote, I spoke to the Democratic leader of the Florida Senate, Lori Berman.
In hindsight, I will tell you, this was an absolute partisan, illegal gerrymander. The thing that struck me the most about this special session was when we questioned the map maker, and he told us that he did it with partisan intent. And then we heard from the attorney who told us that they feel that the Fair Districts Amendment, which is part of the Florida Constitution, is invalid. And it's interesting that this attorney has decided he's the judge and the jury, and he's going to throw out something that 63% of Floridians supported.
Well, it's not just the attorney, it's the governor. The governor has basically decided that there are parts of the Florida Constitution he doesn't feel bound by. I mean, that's more disconcerting, right?
Very disconcerting that the governor, that and the fact that the governor gave a color-coded map to Fox News before we as legislators even had the opportunity to review the map. There were so many things that were done improperly in connection with this map, including the lines on the map itself also.
Now, the governor had originally given two reasons for why they needed to do redistricting. One was he was anticipating that the Florida or the U.S. Supreme Court would strike down parts of the Voting Rights Act that guaranteed certain minority districts in drawing congressional districts, a case out of Louisiana. Now, he submitted his map before that case was decided. It actually was decided the way the governor thought it was going to be during the session. But even with that one reason, the other reason he gave was an increase in population in Florida. But under questioning by you and others, it became clear this map really still relies on the 2020 census. It doesn't take into account the new people. That's why none of the seats changed in North Florida, for instance. But how would you talk to me about that?
So a couple different points. I want to go first to the issue that you raised about the changes in population. So we still use the same census data. We still have the same 28 congressional seats. But more interesting, they claim they used some shifting population numbers and that was partly why they had to do it. But when you look at the map, there's no shifting in the north part of Florida, and the Jacksonville area has been one of the highest growing areas in terms of population. So that negates any discussion of the fact that they were taking into account shifting population when they drew the map. I want to go to the second consideration that you raised about the Supreme Court case. I would disagree a little bit in that what the governor's office said was that they expected Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act to be ruled unconstitutional. And when you read the Calais opinion, they say Section 2 is still in effect. It's just a harder standard to meet. So I don't think they have any basis based on that Supreme Court opinion either to draw new maps at this time. There's no reason that they didn't say you can't have minority districts. They just made a higher and a harder standard to meet if you are going to have a minority district.
Obviously, this is going to end up in litigation and will eventually, we're not sure how quickly, end up before the Florida Supreme Court. As you know, 6 of the 7 current justices on the Florida Supreme Court were appointed by Ron DeSantis. How confident are you that the justices will live up to their oath and take this seriously?
I'm very confident that we, as the Democratic caucus, made an amazing case to show why this is a violation of the Florida Constitution. In questioning and in debate, we set forth all the factors that a court would look at to see that this is clearly unconstitutional. I do have a little concern because of exactly what you said. All these justices have been appointed by the governor. I believe there might be an avenue to appeal to the United States Supreme Court And maybe even if the Florida Supreme Court rules one way, the United States Supreme Court could take a look at this and come down, hopefully, with the decision to show that this is truly being done to violate a state constitution.
Do you anticipate that this map will likely hold at least through the midterm, that any court decision might not come until sometime in 27? Or do you think that this could get struck down sooner?
I think it'll be very difficult for it to be struck down sooner. We are in an extraordinarily tight time frame right now. The governor has said that as soon as he gets the map, he will sign it. We don't know exactly when he will get the map. There is no requirement. The legislature could hold it and wait and give it to him after qualifying, although I think that's highly unlikely. And then qualifying is June 8th. So if the governor gets the map, signs the map, the new districts are going to be drawn for the June 8th qualifying, and the election will probably take place with those new maps, even though there won't have been a chance to litigate whether or not these maps were drawn constitutionally.
Again, you pointed out, as we discussed earlier, that this map was first released to Fox News, color-coded red and blue, before even the legislators got it. What significance do you draw from that?
The significance is that the governor wanted to show his hardcore supporters that he was going to gerrymander Florida and try and get 4 more congressional seats. Plain and simple.
When we come back, we will talk to the legal advisor who helped pass the Fair Districts Amendment back in 2010. Stay with us.
And we've got this guy, Hakeem Jeffries. Okay? And, he goes out there and he's like, we're going to do maximum warfare against Republicans, Florida Republicans. If you F around, you're going to find out all this stuff. And, what I said was, listen, and he's like, oh, if you do the redistricting, we're going to take out all your members, we're going to do all this stuff. And what I said was, go ahead, make my day. I don't think we're going to...
Welcome back. That was Governor Ron DeSantis on Friday doing an impersonation of what the highest-ranking African-American member of Congress sounds like. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, in the past, when the legislature has done congressional redistricting, they have held public hearings around the state, like they did after the 2010 census. Or they embarked on a lengthy legislative process, as they did in 2022. But this time, there was nothing deliberate about the process. 24 hours after the governor gave the legislature the map, they were voting on it in a committee. And the level of secrecy surrounding how this map was drawn was rather amazing. During the one hearing in the Senate, senators from both parties tried to find out who was involved in creating the map that gave Republicans 4 additional seats. Here's Republican Senator Jen Bradley questioning the governor's map maker, Jason Poreda.
Can you identify individuals that you were in consultation with through the map-making process? Any outside groups involved? Can you give us a sense of who you collaborated with in the rendition of this map?
So I'm the only map drawer. I'm the only one that moved any lines around on the map. I did work with other EOG staff and counsel, but I'll leave it at that.
EOG refers to the Executive Office of the Governor. And this was how Poreda responded when Senator Rosalynn Osgood asked the same question.
Any other internal conversations I had with the EOG staff or our counsel, I'm going to keep between us.
And this is what happened when Senator Lori Berman gave it a try.
Can you tell us who reviewed this map before it was published yesterday?
I'm going to leave that with the same answer I just gave.
I'm confused why you can't tell us who had the opportunity to review this map. What privilege or what reason is there for not telling us who reviewed this map?
I've been advised by counsel to just leave it at EOG staff and counsel that, and that's it.
One reason why the governor is being so secretive is he knows there will be a lawsuit, and he wants to make it as hard as possible for the group suing to get to the truth. Now, back in 2010, former Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber was the legal advisor for the Fair Districts Amendment and was part of the legal team that successfully sued the state in 2015 over redistricting. I spoke to him about what will likely happen next. First, what was your reaction to how the governor has handled this entire redistricting matter? And then let's talk about whether or not fair districts is now vulnerable.
Well, first of all, obviously the Constitution was not the organizing principle of the governor's maps. It was clearly his own hubris, because he just simply disregarded one of the more popular constitutional amendments in the last few decades. 62% of Florida voters said they wanted districts that were drawn fairly, compactly, and with those kinds of elements. And they did not want districts done precisely the way Governor DeSantis drew these districts. So this was not about the people of Florida. It was not about the Constitution of Florida. It was about Governor DeSantis and probably pleasing, Republican primary voters in 28.
Well, but let's go to the issue. Do you believe that these maps, as they are now drawn, as they have been approved by the legislature, do you see them as violating the Fair Districts Amendment?
Well, of course they violate the Fair Districts Amendments. The Fair Districts Amendments say you can't draw a map with the intent to favor or disfavor a political party or an incumbent. And they've all, but I think they've actually admitted they were drawn with partisan intent. So clearly they violate the Fair District Amendments that the people of Florida wanted in their Constitution. That's not even a question.
Well, let me jump in. Let me jump in to be fair. The map maker testified before the Senate Rules Committee that he used partisan data, but denied that it was with partisan intent. That he said he did not draw these maps with partisan intent. He simply used partisan data. I don't know if it's a distinction without much of a difference, but go ahead.
Ridiculous, obviously. Florida, you can do an analysis with metrics that are in violate scientific principles. And Florida's map currently is one of the most partisan drawn in the country. The new map is even more partisan. And every word from the president, from the governor, has been about getting more Republican seats. I actually litigated these maps 10 years ago for the fair districts on a team of litigators, and we had the maps thrown out. We had to find emails and texts showing and sort of finding the intent. It's not even a question here. Obviously, we know what they wanted to do because they've said it. They've answered the president's call to do it. And now he's saying the amendments themselves that prohibit it are not even applicable. So obviously, this would not be a difficult case to make in any court, and it shouldn't be a difficult case to make in any court.
Well, except they are going to make it difficult to make, because one of the things that they've done is by not including any legislators. I think back when you did this lawsuit 10 years ago, you were able to question legislators, see emails, text messages, look at all of the material around it. They've done none of that. They've shared nothing with any legislator during this process. The map maker said he just spent the last 2 weeks creating the map, and when he was specifically asked, who in the governor's office assisted you, who did you consult with, he refused to identify individuals who theoretically could now be deposed to get to that very issue of intent.
First of all, if you've sort of made the case as to why it's clearly partisan, if they had nothing to hide, why would they hide everything? If everything they said was just fine, why would they refuse to say anything? That argument's being made by them, and the best evidence is just to look at the maps themselves. They are bragging about getting rid of Democratic congressmen. Why would they use partisan data if they didn't want to affect a partisan outcome? So this is sort of a silly argument to say. So I think what the Florida Supreme Court should do is say, look, I understand all these questions are being raised by the governor. The legislature passed this. Let's give everybody a chance to do discovery. Let's have a trial. Let's do all that. But let's not deliver those maps into operation today for the midterms, because frankly, those maps have not gone through the kind of pressure testing that the other map went through when the Florida Supreme Court reviewed it, and it was litigated. So I think the Florida Supreme Court should kick this can down the road, this horrible looking can down the road, let it be litigating, where I think ultimately plaintiffs will win and have these new maps thrown out. But to rely on these maps a couple months before the election is really a travesty.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, what the options are for the state Supreme Court. As you know, 6 of the 7 current justices on the state Supreme Court were appointed by Ron DeSantis. So there's a perception among many that this is a court that will do the governor's bidding, having been largely appointed by him. Do you subscribe to that theory? Do you believe that the justices of the Florida Supreme Court will honor their oaths, or do you think that they will favor their political benefactor in Ron DeSantis?
Listen, I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for a long time. I've litigated this issue before, and I think and hope that the court will do the right thing. I don't think any judge wants their legacy to be that they found that they issued an opinion that deprived Floridians out of what they wanted in their constitution. I'm hopeful, frankly. And, even though judges are picked politically, often the weight of their office allows them to do things that are proper and consistent with the law. And I hope that they do that.
Except I know what the argument is going to be by DeSantis and his counsel, which is the field of play is very different now, given the Calise decision that just came down from the U.S. Supreme Court that basically struck down another element of the Voting Rights Act that said that you cannot draw lines to benefit a particular race, which was something that was included in fair districts. It was just one of the prongs. And so, therefore, since the Louisiana map was struck down, Alabama, other states are redrawing, that they will argue that knowing this decision was coming and actually having it come in the midst of this debate, they would have been required to redraw their maps this year anyway.
That is absolutely untrue. The Supreme Court, as you're talking about, is the Calais decision. It's about federal law. It's about Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and it does not prevent states from providing greater protections to their citizens through state law. That's just clear. By the way, in that decision, the Supreme Court quoted Rucho v. Common Cause greatly. That case was a very well-known case a few years ago where they actually talked about the Fair District Amendments and said states can do that. Now, to your point that they're dealing with the minority and gerrymander districts, the minority districts, that doesn't change the fact that the remaining provisions, assuming a court were to have a trouble with it, can't independently operate. There's no reason why the Supreme Court would say, aha, because 2 words out of the Fair District Amendments we think we may have trouble implementing doesn't change the rest of the amendment, which can independently operate, and which, by the way, was the centerpiece of the amendment when it passed. People voted for what was the most visible part of the amendment, which clearly was the prohibition against partisan and incumbent partisan gerrymandering and incumbency protection. And those remain, and they can be animated through the amendment precisely the way the people of Florida wanted them to.
We'll be right back. Well, that's all the time we have today. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.